What's up guys, Rogue9 here, and as we are well used to by now, the new operators coming with Operation Steel Wave will bring with them some familiar weapons, and the choice to give the 2-speed, 2-armor attacker Ace the AK-12 assault rifle is, shall we say, interesting, to say the least? Now normally the goal of my Loadout meta series is to compare a character's two main weapons in order to help players decide which one is better for them, but let's be honest here. Bringing the M1014 shotgun on an attacker who not only has a hard breaching tool as his main gadget, but also has access to breaching charges as a secondary gadget is about as redundant as bringing a reserve of spare snowballs on your trip to the Antarctic. I mean really, Ace doesn't need more breaching capabilities, and a primary shotgun on attack is literally never a competitively viable choice. Ace might as well just come with one primary weapon for all the good the 1014 will do. So with that in mind, we will be switching things up a little today. The focus of this video will be to firstly explore the differences between Fuze's and Ace's AK-12s, then to provide evidence-based recommendations on which attachments to slap on the rifle while playing as Ace, then we'll check whether or not it's worth considering the suppressor on the AK before rounding the video off with a bit of a general insight into the rifle's performance. Basically answering the question of what can you expect in terms of the fragging power when playing as Ace. When looking at the AK-12 on Ace, one of the first surprising things I noticed is that there are some subtle yet noticeable differences when compared to the AK-12 as wielded by Fuze. The technical stats of the guns are identical. Same fire rate, same damage and damage drop-off, same magazine capacity and total ammo pool. But when it comes to the handling of each gun, they are slightly different, and I have to say, I really like that. It makes perfect sense that the same gun could possibly handle slightly differently when handled by different characters with their hands. Now, a simple comparison of the in-game recoil patterns shows that they are essentially identical, but here on the Rogue9 channel, the word simple and analysis just don't go together, so of course we tested the actual recoil in-game, and lo and behold, they're similar, but there are some apparent differences that consistently recur from trial to trial. If you look closely, you can see that the first few shots in the bursts fired by Ace tend to be less horizontally dispersed, but with slightly more vertical recoil. Later on in the burst, it appears as if Ace's pattern is usually just a little bit wider than that of Fuze. I have a theory as to why recoil patterns are different in practice even though the menu charts are the same, but I think I'll have to reserve a discussion on that for a dedicated video on how the recoil actually works in Rainbow Six Siege. I'll add it to my to-do list, and hey, maybe I'll get around to it before the end of the year. The important takeaway for now is that Ace does not have quite the same control as Fuze does when it comes to firing the AK-12 in full auto. It's subtle, but I do believe there is a difference. The factor that is definitely different is the hipfire spread each character will experience. In principle, the two AKs do have the same hipfire stats in all different stances, whether that's standing, firing while standing, kneeling, or prone. The difference for the two operators comes from their different movement speeds. Fuze's key weakness is that over the years he's had a few too many beef stroganoffs which turned him into a chunky boy. But when it comes to hipfire spread, being faster is actually a disadvantage because the faster you move, the greater the spread you will experience, and you can see this affecting Ace simply when moving or when moving while shooting. So two slight handling disadvantages when playing as Ace, but on the plus side, he is able to use the standard NATO sights while Fuze is still stuck with the Russian ones, because that's still a thing in Siege apparently. Sight preference is a personal matter really, but I think that most players will prefer the ACOG over the PKAS sight, so I'll just put this down as a slight advantage for Ace. Besides the sight choices, all other attachment options are the same, so why don't we move seamlessly over to those? Which attachment options offer the best controllability for the AK-12? Let's start out by choosing a muzzle attachment. In our earlier recoil comparisons, you will have noticed that the first 3 shots of a burst with the AK-12 are pretty straight, and after that the gun starts to veer off to the right, while the horizontal movement can become somewhat random. In the comparison in the background now, you can see the muzzle brake, flash hider and compensator compared side by side. As you would expect, the muzzle brake is great at controlling the first shot recoil, the compensator is useful for dampening the random horizontal movement throughout the entire burst, and the flash hider is a result of when a muzzle brake and a compensator love each other very much, and we end up with something that is a bit of both. It has a bit of an effect on the first shot recoil, and a bit of an effect on the random movement during the entire burst. Once we've run through all of the ammo, these are the resulting burst patterns. If you only ever shoot very short bursts, then I guess the muzzle brake would be ideal for you. It really evens out the first 3 shots perfectly. Most players in Siege though will frequently fire very long bursts, and if you're going to be doing that with the AK-12, then really the compensator is the way to go. You can always train yourself to counter the vertical recoil, but random side-to-side movement is by definition, well, random and unpredictable, so my personal recommendation here has to be the compensator. My follow-on practical test, where I tried all 3 attachments while controlling the recoil, only served to underline this conclusion. Because the AK-12 has a relatively large recoil diamond, that's basically the chance of random dispersion from shot to shot, the compensator is the perfect fit for this gun and will suit most players in most situations. That's the muzzle attachment sorted, and when it comes to the grips, the questions we need to answer are pretty simple. Do we need the vertical grip to control the recoil, or can we get by without it, in which case the 40% faster ADS time of the angled grip is the way to go. Fun fact, I have come to realize that I hate the slow ADS time in Siege so much that I recently went through the menu and slapped the angled grip on literally every gun that can take it. But as the test footage clearly shows, the recoil of the AK-12 is a bit stiffer than for most other guns, and controlling the burst is much easier with the vertical grip. At the end of the day, it's a personal choice for each individual player. I think that the angled grip could be viable, and I might start out using it, but if I notice that I'm not accurate enough with my bursts, I will simply have to go for the vertical instead and put up with the slow as shit aiming. The final attachment question to consider is whether or not the suppressor could be a viable choice for Ace. The in-game stats tell us that the damage of the AK-12 goes down from 45 points per shot to 38 once the suppressor is attached, and as is tradition, this information is of course wrong, and the actual suppressor damage is 40 points up close and 19 at max range. It's quite surprising how misleading all of the suppressor info in the game still is. For more information on this topic, do check out my recent video, link in the top right hand corner now and coming up in the end card. What does a reduction from 45 to 40 damage mean? Well, actually, it's good news, everyone. Up to 25 meters distance, the number of total shots to down or kill is only increased by 1 body shot against level 3 armor opponents and level 1s wearing rook plates. That means that level 1 and 2 armors, as well as level 2 and 3 armors with plates, will take the exact same number of body hits with or without the suppressor attached. Of course, at long ranges, you will need 1 extra body shot for every opponent type with or without armor, but Siege is a pretty close-ranged game, so I would say that the suppressor on the AK-12 could actually be a viable choice. In most situations, against 4 out of the 6 armor and plate combos, the loss in damage won't actually affect the takedown power, and in every other case, it's 1 extra body shot. The only other question is whether or not the gun will still be controllable enough without the compensator, and if we check out the footage in the background, I would say, yeah, the suppressor's not too bad. Sure, the vertical grip and compensator combo is definitely still easier to handle, but compared to the angled grip option, the suppressor with the vertical is still pretty good. My conclusion here would be that any of these 3 choices could work really well for you depending on the playstyle you pick for any given round. If you're pretty confident on your vertical recoil control and you want to push a bit more aggressively, the angled/compensator setup could be your best pick. If you're feeling like being a sneaky snake, then vertical and suppressor is a pretty decent option, but if you need a bit more help with the recoil control and you're going to be playing more cautiously with a lot more angle holding or longer range engagements, then go for the vertical grip plus compensator. And finally, if you're wondering whether or not the AK-12 on Ace would be any good, let's perform a quick analysis of how strong this gun really is. In my recent-ish Fuze Loadout meta video, link at the end if you haven't seen it, I offered the following conclusion. The only reason that players are not calling the AK-12 OP or a crutch is because Fuze as a one-speed attacker is just not picked often enough for it to make the impact it really could. As long as you use the compensator to get the gun under control, it is a real beast of a weapon and quite possibly one of the best you can get on any operator in Rainbow Six Siege right now. If the AK-12 was on a 2 or 3 speed op, it would be a real menace and make no mistake, but it isn't, and so it's probably just right where it is. Over the last year, poor old Twitch has been hit with nerf after nerf after nerf, all because in the eyes of the devs, the players were using her wrong. People were choosing Twitch not for her utility, but for her incredibly powerful gun, which was called overpowered and a crutch. Well, now that the mighty AK-12 will be available on a 2-speed operator, I almost feel that sooner or later it's going to become the new F2, because the fact is that out of all of the fully automatic weapons in the game, the AK-12 has the second highest damage per second output. The AK-12 has the second highest damage per second output of all, only beaten by the SMG-11. Let's just compare the basic stats of the two guns, shall we? The AK-12 has very high damage and still has a fire rate that is 100 RPM higher than the average for the assault rifle class. The DPS is unbeaten at close range, capacity is pretty standard, and the reload times are only 1/10 of a second below the class average of 3.3 and 2.5 seconds. It does have access to the angled grip, and the hip fire spread is about a third better than the F2 in every situation. See comparisons here. And last but not least, despite all of its power, the recoil is only slightly more challenging than usual, and compared to the F2's recoil, which has been targeted by nerfs several times now, it's still an absolute dream. In terms of shots to kill both at short range and at long range, the AK has advantages, and despite the slower fire rate, this still translates into time to down or kill advantages at short range in almost all cases. Hibana is probably the closest rival of Ace in terms of their roles in the team, and interestingly, the AK-12 has the exact same fire rate as her Type 89 rifle, except with 12.5% more close-range damage and a 50% larger magazine capacity. The end result is that whichever way you want to slice it, the AK-12 is one of the best weapons in the game right now, and on a 2-speed operator with a very useful hard-breaching utility, it has every potential to become the new R4C, or the new 416, or the new F2. If you have access to Ace once the new season launches, all I can say is make use of him while you can, because sooner or later the AK-12 is almost certainly going to get nerfed in some way or another. So there you have it, a quick-ish overview of the AK-12's performance potential, the minor differences between Fuze and Ace, and a guide on how best to set the gun up for your individual playstyle. What attachments do you think you will be running most on the AK-12? I would normally ask you to vote in the poll, but YouTube is discontinuing them, so leave a comment below instead. Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next episode.